Hey, kid, you can't stay here.
Please. I have nowhere else.
That's not my problem. Go find a shelter or something.
They told me to find you. They said you would help.
Who told you? I don't even know you.
My mom. Before everything.
Wait. What? Who's your mom?
Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. She said you knew her.
That's impossible. Sarah is. No! This can't be real.
Please don't send me away. I'm so scared.
David Chun hadn't thought about Sarah Mitchell in over 8 years. The name hit him like a freight train, dragging memories he'd buried deep into the unforgiving present. He stood frozen in his apartment doorway, staring at the small figure before him. The girl couldn't have been more than 7. Her clothes hung off her thin frame, soaked through from the rain that had been falling for hours.
Come inside. Just for a minute.
He stepped aside, and the child shuffled past him, leaving wet footprints on the hardwood floor. David closed the door and leaned against it, trying to steady his breathing. The girl stood in the center of his living room, clutching a threadbare teddy bear, looking around with wide, uncertain eyes. Water dripped from her hair onto his floor. He should get her a towel. He should call someone. He should do something other than stand there like an idiot.
What's your name?
Emma.
Emma. Okay. Emma, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Where's your mom right now?
The girl's face crumpled, and for a moment David thought she might cry again. But she just squeezed the teddy bear tighter and stared at the floor.
She's gone. The people came and took her away 3 days ago. I've been hiding.
Took her away? What people? Police? Social services?
I don't know. Men in suits. They had papers. Mom told me to run. To find you.
David ran his hand through his hair, his mind racing. Sarah Mitchell. God, he hadn't seen her since that summer in Portland. They'd worked together at the same restaurant, shared some laughs, a few late-night conversations about dreams and disappointments. Nothing more. At least, he'd thought it was nothing more. When she'd left town suddenly that August, he'd assumed she'd found something better. He'd never heard from her again.
Emma, I need to ask you something important. Why did your mom tell you to find me specifically?
The girl finally looked up at him. Her eyes were brown, deep and haunted by something no 7-year-old should have to carry.
She said you were the only one who could keep me safe. She said you were good. That you wouldn't let them take me.
Safe from what? Who's trying to take you?
I don't know. But Mom was scared. Really scared.
David pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. He should call the police. This wasn't his responsibility. Some kid shows up claiming a connection to someone he barely knew a decade ago, and now he's supposed to what? Play guardian? But something in Emma's expression stopped him. It wasn't manipulation. It was pure, raw fear. The kind that came from experience, not imagination.
All right. First things first. You're soaked. Let me get you some dry clothes and something to eat. Then we'll figure this out.
You're not sending me away?
Not yet. But Emma, I need you to be honest with me about everything. Can you do that?
Yes.
He disappeared into his bedroom and returned with an old t-shirt and some sweatpants that would be comically oversized on her small frame. Emma took them without a word and looked around uncertainly.
Bathroom's down the hall. Second door. Go change. I'll make you something to eat.
She padded away silently, and David stood alone in his living room, listening to the rain hammering against the windows. His apartment suddenly felt too small, too exposed. He moved to the window and looked down at the street below. Empty, just wet pavement reflecting the streetlights. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Sarah Mitchell had sent her daughter to him, a woman he barely knew. A woman who, according to this child, had been taken away by men in suits 3 days ago. None of it made sense. And yet here was Emma, real and terrified, changing clothes in his bathroom. David opened the refrigerator and stared at its sparse contents. He wasn't exactly prepared for unexpected guests, especially not a 7-year-old who looked like she hadn't eaten properly in days. He pulled out eggs, cheese, and some bread. Scrambled eggs and toast. Simple. He could manage that without burning down the apartment. As the butter melted in the pan, he heard the bathroom door open. Emma emerged wearing his oversized t-shirt that reached her knees, the sweatpants abandoned. She tried to dry her hair with the towel, but it still hung in damp tangles around her face. She stood in the hallway, watching him with those careful eyes.
Feel better?
Yes. Thank you.
Sit down. Food's almost ready.
She climbed onto one of the two chairs at his small kitchen table, placing the teddy bear carefully beside her plate. David noticed how she moved, quietly, taking up as little space as possible, as if she'd learned to make herself invisible. He slid the eggs onto a plate, added 2 pieces of buttered toast, and set it in front of her along with a glass of water.
Eat slowly. Your stomach might not be used to it if you haven't eaten much.
Emma picked up the fork and began eating with surprising restraint. Not the desperate gulping he'd expected, but careful, measured bites. Like someone who'd gone hungry before and knew how to pace themselves. David sat across from her, watching, trying to make sense of any of this.
So, Portland. That's where you're from?
We moved around a lot. Portland, Seattle, Sacramento. Mom said we couldn't stay anywhere too long.
Why not?
Emma chewed slowly, her eyes dropping to her plate.
She never told me exactly. She just said it wasn't safe. That they were looking for us.
They. You keep saying they. Who are they, Emma?
I don't know. I really don't. Mom wouldn't tell me. She said the less I knew, the safer I'd be.
David leaned back in his chair, frustration building in his chest. This was insane. A child running from some unnamed threat, sent to him by a woman he'd known for maybe 3 months, almost a decade ago. Nothing about this story held together. And yet Emma sat there, real and solid, eating scrambled eggs at his kitchen table.
Do you have anything else? Papers, documents, a phone number? Anything that might help me understand what's going on?
Emma finished chewing and reached into the pocket of her discarded hoodie that she'd brought back from the bathroom. She pulled out a crumpled photograph and slid it across the table. David picked it up carefully. The photo was old, faded, the edges worn from handling. It showed Sarah Mitchell, looking exactly as he remembered her. Dark hair, bright smile, that gap between her front teeth. But she wasn't alone. She was holding a baby, and standing next to her was a man David didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a suit. His face was slightly turned away from the camera, as if he'd been caught mid-movement.
Who's this?
I don't know. Mom never told me. But she kept this picture hidden. She looked at it sometimes when she thought I was asleep.
And the baby is you?
I think so. Mom said it was taken when I was 6 months old.
David studied the photograph more carefully. There was something in Sarah's expression, something he couldn't quite name. Not happiness, despite the smile. Fear, maybe. Or resignation. The man beside her had his hand on her shoulder, the gesture almost possessive. David turned the photo over. On the back, written in faded ink, was a single word: forgive.
Forgive what?
I don't know. I asked her once. She just cried.
David set the photograph down and rubbed his eyes. It was past midnight. He had work in the morning. His life had been predictable, manageable. He went to his job as a network security analyst, came home, watched TV, occasionally met friends for drinks. Simple, safe. And now this child sat in his kitchen, dragging him into something that felt increasingly dangerous with every word she spoke.
Emma, I need to make some calls. Try to find out what happened to your mom. Where they took her. But that means I might have to talk to the police or social services.
Emma's reaction was immediate. She pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, her whole body tensing.
No. You can't. Mom said no police. She made me promise. She said they're part of it. I'm telling you what she told me. No police. Please. If you call them, they'll take me and I'll disappear just like her.
Tears streamed down her face now, her small body shaking. David stood up and moved around the table, crouching down beside her chair.
Okay, I won't call anyone tonight. I promise. But Emma, We can't just hide forever. We need to figure out what's actually happening.
You believe me? You believe that something's wrong?
David looked at her tear-streaked face, at the photograph on the table, at the worn teddy bear that had clearly been cherished for years. He thought about Sarah Mitchell, how she'd disappeared without explanation that summer, how he'd tried calling her once, twice, and the number had been disconnected. How odd that had seemed at the time, though he'd eventually forgotten about it, moved on with his life.
I believe something scared your mother. And I believe she thought sending you to me was the safest option. So yeah. I believe you.
Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her breathing gradually steadying.
So what do we do?
Tonight? You sleep. You're exhausted. Tomorrow, I'll call in sick to work and we'll start trying to find answers. Real answers, not just pieces of a puzzle we can't see.
Where should I sleep?
You can take the bed. I'll sleep on the couch.
I can sleep on the couch. I've slept in worse places.
The casual way she said it made David's chest tighten. What kind of life had this kid been living? Moving from city to city, sleeping in worse places, learning to make herself invisible?
The bed's more comfortable. Trust me, the couch is terrible. My back won't let me forget it, but I'll survive one night.
He led her to his bedroom, a small space with a double bed, a dresser, and not much else. Emma climbed onto the bed, still clutching her teddy bear, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She looked impossibly small in the center of the mattress.
If you need anything, I'm right outside. Just call.
David,
Yeah?
thank you for not sending me away.
He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and pulled the door partially closed, leaving it open a crack so she wouldn't feel trapped. He returned to the living room and collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. His phone sat on the coffee table, dark and silent. He picked it up, scrolled through his contacts, and stopped at a name he hadn't called in years. Marcus Reed. They'd been roommates in college, stayed close for a while after graduation. Marcus had gone into private investigation work, the kind that skirted the edges of legal and less legal. David had always thought it was slightly shady. Now he was grateful for it. David typed out a message instead of calling. It was late, and he needed time to think about what he'd even say. Need to talk. Something weird came up. Can you meet tomorrow? He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response came faster than he expected. Just 2 words. 10 a.m. Usual place. David set the phone down and picked up the photograph again. The man in the suit. Sarah's forced smile. That single word on the back. Forgive. He pulled out his laptop and opened it. The screen's glow harsh in the darkroom. He typed Sarah Mitchell's name into a search engine. Thousands of results. Too common a name. He added Portland, then the year they'd worked together. Nothing useful. Just social media profiles that weren't her, wedding announcements for different Sarah Mitchells, obituaries that made his stomach drop until he checked the dates and locations. He tried a different approach. He logged into his old email account, the one he'd used back then, and searched for her name. A few messages appeared. Casual stuff. Can you cover my shift Thursday? And thanks for the coffee recommendation. Nothing personal. Nothing that suggested any deeper connection. Certainly nothing that would explain why she'd send her daughter to him 8 years later. He clicked through to the last email she'd sent. The date was August 15th. Hey David, something came up and I have to leave town. Thanks for everything. Take care. S. That was it. No explanation. No forwarding address. He'd thought it was strange at the time, but people left jobs abruptly all the time. He'd assumed she'd found something better, or maybe had some family emergency. He'd moved on. Except now he was learning that maybe she hadn't moved on. Maybe she'd been running. David opened a new browser tab and tried searching for recent news about women named Sarah Mitchell being arrested or detained. Nothing in the past week. He broadened the search. Still nothing that matched. Either it hadn't been reported, or it hadn't been done through official channels. Men in suits with papers. That sounded federal. FBI? Marshals? But for what? He closed the laptop, exhaustion pulling at him. His mind spun with questions he couldn't answer. The apartment was quiet except for the rain, which had softened to a steady patter against the windows. He stretched out on the couch, pulling a throw blanket over himself. Sleep felt impossible, but his body had other ideas. Within minutes, his eyes grew heavy. He woke to darkness and the sound of footsteps. David sat up quickly, his heart pounding, before he realized it was just Emma. She stood in the hallway, backlit by the dim light from the bedroom.
I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see them taking her away.
Come here.
She walked over and sat on the edge of the couch. David could see she'd been crying again.
Want to tell me about it? Sometimes talking helps.
We were staying in this motel. Mom had just gotten paid from her cleaning job. She bought me a burger for dinner. A real one, from a restaurant, not just something microwaved. She seemed happy. Like maybe things were going to be okay.
Emma hugged her teddy bear tighter.
Then someone knocked on the door. Mom looked through the peephole and her whole face changed. She grabbed my hand and told me to hide in the bathroom. She said no matter what I heard, I had to stay quiet. She said if they took her, I should wait until they left and then run.
And that's what happened.
I heard her arguing with them. She was shouting that they had no right, that she'd done everything they asked. Then it got quiet. I heard the door close. I waited like she said. When I came out, she was gone. Her purse was there. Her phone. But she was just gone.
David felt anger rising in his chest. Whatever was happening, it involved grown adults terrorizing a child and tearing her away from her mother. That wasn't justice. That was something else entirely.
You said she'd done everything they asked. What did she mean by that?
I don't know. Mom didn't talk about it. But sometimes she'd get phone calls and she'd go outside to talk. When she came back in, she'd be crying. Or angry. Or just empty.
How long had that been happening?
A few months, maybe. It got worse recently. The calls came more often. Mom stopped sleeping. She'd just sit by the window all night, watching.
David's mind raced through possibilities. Blackmail? Witness protection gone wrong. Some kind of legal trouble? But Sarah had been a waitress, not exactly living a life that screamed federal investigation. Unless there was something in her past he didn't know about. Which, clearly, there was a lot he didn't know.
Emma, did your mom ever mention my name before? Before she sent you here?
She talked about you sometimes. She said you were kind. That you helped her when she needed it. That you didn't ask too many questions.
Helped her how?
Emma shifted uncomfortably on the couch.
There was this guy at the restaurant. He wouldn't leave her alone. Kept touching her arm, following her to her car. She said you walked her out one night and told him to back off. He never bothered her again.
David had a vague memory of that. Some drunk regular who didn't understand boundaries. He'd barely thought about it at the time, just seemed like the right thing to do. Apparently Sarah had remembered it differently, had held on to it for 8 years as evidence that he was someone she could trust.
I'm glad I could help. But Emma, that was one small thing. It doesn't explain why she'd trust me with you now. With something this serious.
She said you were the only person she knew who wasn't connected. That's the word she used. Connected. She said everyone else from that time was either gone or compromised. But you were just, you. Living your normal life.
Connected to what?
She never said.
David looked at the clock. 3:30 in the morning. In 6.5 hours, he'd meet Marcus. Maybe his old friend could make sense of this nightmare. For now, though, Emma needed rest, even if she couldn't sleep.
How about this? You lie down here on the couch. I'll sit in the chair right there. If you need anything, I'm right here. No more being alone, okay?
Emma nodded and curled up on the couch, pulling the blanket over herself. David moved to the armchair a few feet away, positioning himself where she could see him. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out. She wasn't asleep, not quite, but the tension had left her small body. She felt safe enough to stop being on guard every second. That was something. David pulled out his phone and looked at the photograph again, the digital copy he'd taken earlier. He zoomed in on the man in the suit. The image quality was poor, the photo old and faded even before being captured on his phone's camera. But there was something about the man's posture, The way he stood just slightly apart from Sarah despite his hand on her shoulder. Protective? Possessive? Threatening? Impossible to say. He zoomed in on Sarah's face next. She'd been younger then, probably mid-20s. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. David had seen that expression before, on people who'd learned to hide their fear behind practiced pleasantness. He'd just never noticed it on Sarah because he'd been 26 himself, too caught up in his own life to look closely at anyone else's pain. The word on the back haunted him. Forgive. Was she asking forgiveness? Offering it. From whom? The man in the photo? Someone else entirely? David closed his eyes and tried to remember details from that summer. Had Sarah ever mentioned family? A boyfriend? Legal trouble? Nothing came to mind. They'd worked together, joked around, had a few deeper conversations during slow shifts, but he'd never really known her. Not in any meaningful way. And now her daughter was sleeping on his couch, and he was the only thing standing between Emma and whatever had taken Sarah. The weight of that responsibility settled over him like a physical thing. He wasn't equipped for this. He was a network security analyst who paid his bills on time and occasionally remembered to water his one surviving houseplant. He wasn't a guardian. He wasn't a detective. He was just someone who'd happened to work with a woman 8 years ago and had walked her to her car once. But here he was anyway, because sometimes life didn't care what you were equipped for. Morning came with gray clouds and the promise of rain. David woke to find Emma already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water, staring at nothing. She looked small and lost in her new clothes, her hair still tangled from sleep.
Morning. How'd you sleep?
I had dreams about Mom. She was calling for me, but I couldn't find her.
David poured himself coffee and sat across from her. He'd spent half the night debating whether to tell Emma about the plan, about Denver and the safety deposit box. She deserved to know, but she was also 7 years old and terrified, and knowing might make things worse.
Emma, I need to tell you something. We think we know where your mom hid the information that these people want. The things she took from Meridian.
Where?
In a bank in Denver. In a safety deposit box. That key in the photograph, we think it opens that box. If we can get to it, we might be able to use those files to trade for your mom's safety.
Emma's eyes went wide, hope and fear mixing in her expression.
So we can save her? We can get her back.
Maybe. But it's complicated. The bank is in Denver, which means travel. And getting into the box requires pretending to be your mom, which is risky. If the people looking for her are watching that bank, we could be walking into trouble.
But it's a chance. It's better than doing nothing.
Marcus is setting everything up. He'll have documents ready by this afternoon. But Emma, you need to stay here. It's too dangerous for you to come with us.
Her face fell immediately, that small spark of hope dimming.
You're leaving me alone again.
No. I'll find someone safe to stay with you. Maybe one of Marcus's people, someone we can trust. Just for a day or two while we handle this.
Everyone keeps leaving me. Mom left, and now you're leaving, and I'm just supposed to sit here and wait and hope you come back.
David moved around the table and crouched beside her chair, meeting her eyes.
I am coming back. With your mom, if everything goes right. But I need you safe. Your mom sent you to me to keep you safe, and I can't do that if you're walking into the same danger that got her caught.
What if something happens to you too? What if I'm left all alone?
That's not going to happen. Marcus knows what he's doing. We'll be careful. And you'll be with someone who can protect you better than I can while we're gone.
Emma wiped at her tears but didn't look convinced. David understood. Every adult in her life who'd promised safety had eventually left her. Why should she believe he'd be any different?
Can I at least talk to whoever you leave me with? Make sure they're okay?
Absolutely. I won't leave you with anyone you don't feel comfortable with. Deal?
Deal.
Marcus arrived at 2 in the afternoon with a woman David had never met. She was in her 50s, gray-haired, with the kind of calm, competent demeanor that probably came from years of handling difficult situations. Marcus introduced her as Charlotte, a former social worker who now did private security and protection work.
Charlotte's worked with me on cases involving kids before. She knows how to stay off the radar, and she's trained in defensive tactics if anyone comes looking.
Hi, Emma. Marcus told me you've been having a rough week.
Emma looked Charlotte over carefully, then glanced at David as if checking whether she should trust this stranger.
Hi.
I know this is scary, trusting someone new. But I promise I'm here to keep you safe while David and Marcus help your mom. We'll stay right here in the apartment. We can play games, watch movies, whatever you want. And the second they're back, I'm gone. You'll barely know I was here.
Do you have kids?
I had a daughter. She'd be about 25 now. She passed away when she was 8.
The blunt honesty seemed to reassure Emma more than any amount of cheerful platitudes could have. Charlotte wasn't pretending everything was fine. She understood loss and fear.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's part of why I do this work now. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can help keep other kids safe. Is it okay if I stay with you?
Emma looked at David one more time, then nodded slowly.
Okay.
Marcus pulled David aside while Charlotte settled onto the couch with Emma, showing her a card game.
I've got everything ready. Fake ID for Catherine Brennan, matching signature samples, and a key that should match the bank's system. Flights leave in 3 hours. I booked us undercover names, paid cash through a third party. We'll be in Denver by tonight. Hit the bank first thing tomorrow morning.
What if they're watching the bank?
They probably are. But we've got one advantage. They don't know we know about the box. They're looking for Sarah, not us. As long as we're quick and careful, we should be able to get in and out before anyone realizes what happened.
And if something goes wrong?
Then we run like hell and hope Charlotte can keep Emma safe long enough for us to figure out Plan B. But David, I need to know you're committed to this. Once we're on that plane, there's no backing out. We're all in.
David looked over at Emma, who was attempting to understand the rules of Charlotte's card game, her small face serious with concentration. 48 hours ago, he hadn't even known this kid existed. Now he was about to commit multiple federal crimes to save her mother. It was insane. It was possibly suicidal. It was also the only right choice he could see.
I'm all in.
The airport was crowded with evening travelers, people heading home or away for the holidays. David and Marcus moved through security separately, their fake identities holding up to casual scrutiny. David's hands were sweating despite the terminal's air conditioning. He kept expecting federal agents to materialize, to grab him and demand to know what he was doing with forged documents and a plan to break into a bank vault. But nothing happened. Security waved him through. He collected his bag and found Marcus waiting near their gate, reading a newspaper like they were just two regular travelers. David sat one row away, maintaining the pretense that they weren't traveling together. The flight was unremarkable. David couldn't eat the snacks they offered, his stomach too tight with anxiety. He kept thinking about Emma back at the apartment with Charlotte, about Sarah, wherever she was being held, about the files they were risking everything to recover. What if the box was empty? What if Sarah had moved the files years ago? What if this whole plan was based on a faulty assumption? They landed in Denver at 9:30, the city spread out below them in a grid of lights. Marcus had rented a car using another fake identity, paying cash and providing a false address. They drove to a cheap motel on the edge of the city, the kind of place that didn't ask questions as long as you paid up front.
Get some sleep. We leave for the bank at 8. They open at 9, and we want to be in their lobby right when the doors unlock. First customers, before security has time to get bored and start paying close attention.
What if they ask questions? What if the ID isn't good enough?
Then we smile, apologize for wasting their time, and walk out. No one's going to tackle us in the lobby of a bank. Worst case, they flag the account and we lose our chance. But at least we tried.
David lay in the uncomfortable motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. His phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. Emma's asleep. She ate dinner and we played cards. She's worried about you, but handling it. Stay safe. He texted back a simple thanks, then opened the photo of the safety deposit key again. 847. Such small numbers to carry such enormous weight. His entire future, Emma's future, Sarah's life, all dependent on whether they could get into that box and what they'd find inside. Finally, near midnight, exhaustion won. David slept fitfully, dreaming of locked doors and keys that didn't fit, of Emma calling his name while he ran through endless corridors unable to find her. Morning arrived cold and bright. David showered and dressed in the business casual clothes Marcus had told him to bring. They needed to look professional but not too polished, like someone accessing a safety deposit box for routine business, not criminals attempting a heist. Marcus wore slacks and a blazer, his usual intensity dialed back to something approaching normal.
Remember, you're Catherine Brennan's brother. She asked you to retrieve some documents from her box because she's out of the country. I'm your friend providing moral support. We're calm, routine, forgettable.
What if they ask for proof that I'm her brother?
They won't. Banks care about proper ID and authorization, not family relationships. The ID and signature will be enough. Just stay calm and follow my lead.
They ate a quick breakfast at a diner down the street, David forcing down toast and coffee while Marcus reviewed the plan one more time. Then they were in the car, driving through Denver's morning traffic toward the downtown banking district. Western Fidelity Bank was housed in a modern glass building, its lobby all marble and polished chrome. Security cameras covered every angle. David felt his pulse quicken.
Breathe. We've got this.
They walked through the doors at exactly 9:05, joining two other customers already waiting for service. A young banker approached with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you today?"
We need to access a safety deposit box. Number 847, under the name Catherine Brennan. Of course. Do you have proper identification and authorization?
Marcus pulled out the forged ID and handed it over smoothly. The banker studied it carefully, comparing the photo to Marcus's face. David held his breath. Then the banker nodded and typed something into his computer. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. And do you have the key?" David pulled out the key they'd created based on the photograph, praying it would work. The banker led them through a secure door and down a hallway lined with metal deposit boxes. She stopped at 847, inserted her master key, and gestured for David to insert his. Both keys need to turn simultaneously. David's hand shook slightly as he inserted the key. What if it didn't fit? What if the number in the photograph had been wrong? But the key slid in smoothly. He and the banker turned their keys together, and the small door popped open. "I'll give you privacy. Just call when you're finished." She walked away, leaving David and Marcus alone in the narrow corridor. David pulled out the metal box and set it on the small table provided. His hands were shaking as he lifted the lid.
Please let it be here. Please.
Inside was a padded envelope and a folded piece of paper. David opened the paper first. Sarah's handwriting, unmistakable even after all these years. "To whoever finds this, the files on the drive contain evidence of illegal surveillance conducted by Meridian Data Solutions and multiple federal agencies between 2015 and 2017. Thousands of Americans monitored without warrants. I tried to expose this through proper channels. They destroyed my life instead. The password is the word I hope my daughter will someday speak to me. Use this to make them answer for what they've done. Catherine Brennan / Sarah Mitchell." David's throat tightened. The words Sarah hoped Emma would speak. "Forgive." He opened the envelope and pulled out a small external hard drive, no bigger than his thumb. This tiny piece of metal and silicon had cost Sarah everything. Her career, her identity, 7 years of running, and finally her freedom. It contained evidence that could bring down executives and federal officials, expose massive constitutional violations, trigger investigations and prosecutions.
That's it. That's what they've been hunting all these years.
She wrote that Emma might forgive her someday. For running, for the life they had to live. Sarah thought she needed forgiveness.
She made an impossible choice. Expose corruption and lose everything, or stay silent and let it continue. There's no winning in that situation. Only different ways of losing.
David carefully placed the drive and note back in the envelope and tucked it inside his jacket. They returned the empty box to its slot, locked it, and walked back to the lobby. The young banker smiled as they passed. "Did you find everything you needed?"
Yes, thank you. All set?
They walked out of the bank at 9:28, just another forgettable transaction in the morning rush. David expected alarms, shouting, federal agents appearing from nowhere. But the street was normal. People walking past, cars in traffic, the city functioning exactly as it had been when they'd entered.
Don't run. Don't look nervous. We're just two guys who accessed a safety deposit box and are now leaving. Normal. Boring.
They walked 2 blocks to where they'd parked the car. Marcus drove carefully, obeying every traffic law, taking a circuitous route back toward the motel. Only when they'd been driving for 20 minutes without any sign of pursuit did he finally let out a breath.
We did it. We actually did it.
Now what? We have the files, but they still have Sarah. How do we trade?
Very carefully. We need to copy the drive first, create insurance. Then we need to make contact and set terms. But David, this is where it gets really dangerous. These people have already shown they're willing to operate outside the law. Making a deal with them is like negotiating with a wild animal. Even if they agree, they might still attack.
David pulled out his phone and texted Charlotte. "We got it. Coming home soon." Her response came quickly. "Emma will be relieved. She's been asking about you every hour." The drive. Sarah's note. Years of evidence sitting in his jacket pocket. David thought about Emma back in his apartment, waiting to hear if her mother would come home. About Sarah, wherever she was being held, probably being interrogated about the location of these very files. About the choice he now faced: try to trade with people who had no reason to keep their word, or go public and hope the exposure would force them to release Sarah before they silenced her permanently.
What would you do? If it was your call?
Honestly, I'd copy the files to multiple locations, send them to journalists under encryption, and then contact Meridian with proof that the information goes public if anything happens to Sarah. Mutually assured destruction. They can't use the files if everyone already has them, and they can't silence Sarah without triggering the release.
That's assuming they act rationally. What if they're so desperate to contain this that they're willing to risk exposure?
Then Sarah is probably already dead, and we're just trying to make sure her sacrifice meant something. But I don't think we're there yet. If they killed her, they wouldn't be holding her. They're still hoping to contain this quietly.
David looked out the window at Denver passing by. 24 hours ago, he'd been in his apartment, trying to figure out how to help a scared child. Now he was carrying evidence of federal crimes, planning to blackmail government agencies and a private corporation, and hoping it would be enough to save a woman he barely remembered from years ago. His life had become unrecognizable.
Let's do it. Copy the files, set up the dead man's switch, and make contact. Whatever happens, at least Sarah will know we tried.
You've got guts, I'll give you that. Most people would have called the cops and washed their hands of this mess days ago.
Most people didn't have Emma show up at their door. Once you look a scared kid in the eyes and promise to help, you can't just walk away. Not if you want to keep being able to look at yourself in the mirror.
Marcus nodded, understanding in his expression. They drove in silence back to the motel, both men aware that the hardest part of their mission was still ahead. Back at the motel, Marcus pulled out a laptop and several USB drives from his bag. He worked quickly, connecting the external drive to his computer through multiple layers of security software. David watched as files appeared on the screen, thousands of them, organized into folders by date and agency. FBI surveillance logs, NSA data purchases, Homeland Security tracking reports, all collected and analyzed by Meridian without warrants, without oversight, without any legal authorization whatsoever.
Jesus. This is bigger than I thought. They weren't just tracking suspected criminals. They were monitoring journalists, activists, politicians, judges, anyone who might have been inconvenient to certain interests.
How did Sarah get access to all this?
She probably had high-level clearance as part of her job. Someone trusted her with system access, and she used it to document everything. Must have taken months to compile all this without being noticed.
Marcus began copying files to multiple drives, working with practiced efficiency. He explained as he worked, one copy would stay with them. One would go to a lawyer with instructions to release if anything happened to them. One would be sent to an encrypted server with a dead man switch that required regular check-ins. And one would go to a journalist Marcus trusted who specialized in government surveillance stories.
The journalist won't publish immediately, but he'll verify the files are real and prepare the story. If we can't get Sarah back through negotiation, at least we'll have the option of going nuclear.
It took 2 hours to copy and distribute everything. By noon, the insurance was in place. Now came the dangerous part, making contact with the people who'd taken Sarah.
How do we even reach them? It's not like Meridian has a return kidnapped whistleblowers department.
We don't contact Meridian directly. Too many layers, too much deniability. We go to the person who's probably coordinating this search. Someone high enough to make decisions, but low enough to have dirty hands.
Marcus pulled up Meridian's website and navigated to their leadership page. He scrolled past the CEO and board members to the Vice President of Security Operations, a man named Richard Castellan. Former FBI, 20 years with the Bureau before joining Meridian. Exactly the kind of person who'd be handling a situation like this.
Castellan. He's their fixer. If Sarah's being held, he's the one who ordered it. If there's going to be a deal, it goes through him.
How do we contact him without exposing ourselves?
Burner phone, encrypted email, and very careful wording. We let him know we have the files. We know where Sarah is being held, and we're willing to trade. But we also make it clear the files are already distributed. Killing us or Sarah just triggers their release.
Marcus drafted the email on his laptop, his fingers flying across the keys. David read over his shoulder as the message took shape. Professional but direct. No threats, just clear statements of fact. They had the files. Sarah's safety was the price for their continued secrecy. Any harm to Sarah, David, Marcus, or Emma would result in immediate public release. Simple, clean, terrifying.
What if he doesn't respond? What if they decide to call our bluff?
Then we weren't bluffing. We release everything and hope the public outcry is enough to force Sarah's release before they can silence her. It's not perfect, but it's all we've got.
Marcus hit send. The email disappeared into the digital void, heading toward Richard Castellan's inbox through a maze of anonymous servers and encrypted relays. Now they waited. The response came faster than expected. 30 minutes after sending the email, Marcus's burner phone rang. He put it on speaker, his hand steady despite the tension in his jaw. "This is Castellan. I received your message. Who am I speaking with?"
Names don't matter. What matters is that we have Catherine Brennan's files. All of them. Project Overseer, the surveillance logs, everything she copied in 2017. Those files are classified government property. Possessing them is a federal crime. You need to turn them over immediately. We're not interested in legal lectures from someone who kidnapped a woman without due process. Here's how this works. You release Sarah Mitchell unharmed, and the files stay private. You harm her, or us, or her daughter, and every news organization in the country gets a copy within the hour.
There was a long pause on the other end of the line. David could hear Castellan breathing, could almost feel him calculating options and outcomes. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Those files contain information that threatens national security. Releasing them would compromise ongoing operations and put lives at risk.
Save the patriotic speech. We've read the files. This wasn't about national security. It was about illegal surveillance of American citizens for political and corporate gain. You broke the law on a massive scale and destroyed anyone who tried to stop you. Ms. Brennan stole classified information and fled rather than face the consequences. She's a criminal, not a hero.
She tried to report it through proper channels. You know that because you're the ones who shut her down and came after her.
David hadn't meant to speak, but the anger had overwhelmed his caution. Castellan's tone shifted, became more focused. "And you are?"
Someone who's tired of watching powerful people destroy innocent lives. Here's our offer. Release Sarah by midnight tonight. Provide proof she's unharmed, and we keep the files locked away. You get to continue your operations without public scrutiny. Everyone wins. And if we refuse, then tomorrow morning, the Washington Post, New York Times, and Guardian all receive complete copies. Your careers end, Meridian faces federal prosecution, and the agencies you worked with get investigated by Congress. You'll spend the rest of your life in congressional hearings and criminal trials.
Another long pause. David could hear muffled voices in the background. Castellan consulting with someone. "Midnight is impossible. I need time to coordinate." 48 hours.
24. You've had 7 years to catch her. Don't tell me you can't move fast when motivated. You're making demands like you have leverage. But you don't. We know you haven't released those files publicly yet, which means you want something. We all want to avoid exposure. So let's be realistic about timelines.
We want Sarah safe. That's all we've ever wanted. You give us that, and this whole situation goes away. Isn't that worth 24 hours of inconvenience?
Castellan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted to something closer to negotiation than confrontation. 36 hours. I need to coordinate with multiple parties and ensure Ms. Mitchell is transported safely. Meet me at the following location, neutral ground, where we can make the exchange.
We choose the location. We're not walking into an ambush. Fine. Send me coordinates. Somewhere public enough that neither side can act with impunity. And bring proof you actually have the files. We'll send details within the hour. And Castellan? If Sarah isn't there, if she's been harmed in any way, the files go live immediately. No second chances, no negotiations. You get one shot at this. Understood. Same goes for you. If this is some kind of trap, or if you've already distributed those files, the deal is off. We're trusting each other to act in bad faith as little as possible.
The line went dead. Marcus set the phone down and ran his hand over his face.
That was either the smartest thing we've ever done or the stupidest. Hard to tell which.
Do you think he'll actually bring her? Or is this just a stalling tactic while they track us down?
Both, probably. He'll bring Sarah because the alternative is too risky for him. But he'll also have backup plans, contingencies, ways to eliminate us even after the exchange if he thinks he can get away with it.
So what do?
We pick a location that gives us every possible advantage. Somewhere public with multiple exits, security cameras that we can't be accused of controlling, and enough witnesses that any violence would be immediately noticed. Then we show up prepared for this to go sideways.
They spent the next hour planning. Marcus pulled up maps of the area, looking for locations that fit their criteria. They settled on the main plaza in front of Denver's Union Station. Open space, heavy foot traffic, multiple police patrols, and dozens of security cameras operated by the city rather than any private entity. If Castellan tried anything there, it would be documented by systems outside Meridian's control.
Union Station, Main Plaza, 36 hours from now at 3 p.m. Daylight, crowds, maximum visibility. We bring a laptop with the files ready to display. He brings Sarah, unharmed and coherent. We verify she's okay, show him the files, and walk away. Simple as that.
Nothing about this is simple. But I don't see a better option.
Marcus sent the coordinates and time to Castellan, then immediately destroyed the burner phone and tossed it in a dumpster 3 blocks away. They returned to the motel to pack. David's phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte. Emma's getting restless, asking when you're coming home. Should I tell her anything? David typed back carefully. Tell her we're making progress, that we found what we were looking for, and we're coming home soon. Don't mention anything about the exchange until we know it's real. He stared at his phone after sending the message. In 36 hours, this would either be over or catastrophically worse. Either Sarah would be free and Emma could finally stop running, or they'd all be running for the rest of their lives, assuming they survived at all.
You should call Emma. Let her hear your voice. Kids pick up on when adults are scared, and right now you're broadcasting terror pretty clearly.
What am I supposed to say? Everything's going to be fine when I don't know if that's true?
You tell her you're safe, you're working on bringing her mom home, and you're thinking about her. You don't lie, but you don't dump your fear on her either. She needs to know she matters enough for you to check in.
David nodded and dialed Charlotte's number. Emma answered on the second ring, her voice small and worried.
David? Are you okay?
I'm fine. Marcus and I are fine. How are you holding up?
I'm scared. Charlotte's nice, but I don't like being away from you. You're the only one who knows Mom. The only one who understands.
I know it's hard. But we're so close, Emma. We found what we were looking for. Now we just need to set up a meeting to get your mom back.
Really? You really think you can bring her home?
David wanted to promise that everything would be okay, that in a day and a half Emma would be reunited with her mother and all of this nightmare would be over. But he'd already made too many promises he wasn't certain he could keep.
I think we have a real chance. But Emma, I need you to be brave a little bit longer. Can you do that for me? Stay with Charlotte, stay safe, and trust that we're doing everything we can?
What if something goes wrong? What if they hurt you or Mom?
Then Charlotte knows exactly what to do. She has instructions and resources to keep you safe no matter what happens. You're not going to be alone again. I promise you that.
Okay. But David? Please be careful. Please come back.
I will. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me now, kid.
He heard her small laugh on the other end of the line, fragile but real. They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important. The card games she and Charlotte had played, the pizza they'd ordered for dinner, whether David's houseplant was still alive. Normal conversation that felt surreal given everything else happening. When they finally hung up, David felt the weight of responsibility settle over him even more heavily than before.
You care about her. More than you expected to.
She's 7 years old and she's been through hell. How could I not care?
A lot of people could. Most people would have called child services the moment she showed up and let the system handle it. You didn't. You put yourself in danger for a kid you didn't know and a woman you barely remembered. That says something about who you are.
David didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. They spent the rest of the evening preparing for the exchange, reviewing the plan, checking escape routes, making sure their dead man's switch was properly configured. Marcus showed David how to access the emergency release system if something went wrong, how to trigger the file distribution with a single command.
If Castellan tries anything, if this turns into a firefight or we get grabbed, you hit this button. Everything goes public immediately. It won't save us, but at least Sarah and Emma will be protected by exposure. No one can quietly disappear them if the whole world knows their story.
You're talking like you expect this to go bad.
I'm preparing for the possibility. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. That's how you survive situations like this.
They tried to sleep, knowing they'd need to be sharp for the exchange. David lay in the uncomfortable motel bed, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in his mind. Best case, Castellan brought Sarah, they verified she was unharmed, handed over copies of the files, and walked away free. Worst case, Castellan had no intention of honoring the deal and had brought a team to eliminate everyone who knew about Project Overseer. Between those extremes lay dozens of other possibilities, each with their own dangers and complications. His phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. This is Sarah. If you're really trying to help Emma, please be careful. These people don't negotiate in good faith. Whatever they promise, they're lying. Protect my daughter first. Everything else is secondary. Thank you for being there when I couldn't be. David's hands shook as he read the message. Sarah was alive, coherent enough to send warnings. But the message itself was terrifying. She clearly didn't believe Castellan would keep his word. She was telling him to prioritize Emma's safety over rescuing her, asking him to let her go if that's what it took to protect her daughter.
Marcus, you need to see this.
Marcus read the message, his expression darkening.
They let her send this. They want us to know she's alive, but they're also using her to manipulate us. The question is whether this is really Sarah's message or something they forced her to write.
How do we tell the difference?
We can't. Not for certain. But the sentiment sounds genuine. Prioritize Emma. Be careful, don't trust them. Those are things a mother would say even under duress. I think it's really her.
David typed back carefully. Emma is safe. We have what you hid. Exchange is set for tomorrow afternoon. Hold on a little longer. We're bringing you home. The message showed as delivered but not read. Either Sarah no longer had the phone, or they'd taken it away after letting her send that one message. David set his phone aside and closed his eyes, knowing sleep was impossible, but needing to at least rest his body, if not his mind. The 36 hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. David and Marcus stayed in the motel, venturing out only for essential supplies and always watching for any sign they were being followed. Marcus ran constant security checks on their digital systems, making sure the dead man's switch was functioning and the files were properly distributed to their backup locations. Charlotte sent regular updates about Emma. The girl was holding up, but growing more anxious as time passed. She'd stopped eating much, spent hours staring at the photograph of her mother, asked repeatedly when David was coming back. Each message made David more determined to see this through, to give Emma her mother back and end this nightmare. At 2 p.m., they left for Union Station. The plaza was crowded with afternoon commuters and tourists, exactly as they'd hoped. Marcus positioned them near the fountain in the center of the space, backs to the water, clear sight lines in all directions. David carried a laptop in a messenger bag, the hard drive connected and ready to display the files.
He'll probably come early, scope us out, make sure we're alone. Stay calm. Don't react to anything until we verify Sarah is with him and unharmed.
At 2:45, David spotted him. Richard Castellan was easy to identify from his photos. Mid-50s, gray hair, expensive suit, moving through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about consequences. He wasn't alone. Two men flanked him, professional security types trying and failing to blend in. But no Sarah.
She's not with him. This is a trap.
Wait. Look behind them.
A fourth figure emerged from the crowd. Sarah Mitchell, looking exhausted and frightened, but walking under her own power. She wore civilian clothes and no restraints, but the men kept close to her, their body language making clear she wasn't free. Castellan approached to within 10 feet and stopped, his expression neutral. "Gentlemen, I've upheld my end. Ms. Mitchell is here and unharmed. Now it's your turn. Proof of the files."
Let her go first. Show us she's actually free to leave. Not until I verify you have what you claim. For all I know, this is an elaborate bluff.
Marcus opened the laptop and turned it so Castellan could see the screen. Folders upon folders of files, organized and labeled. Surveillance logs, financial records, internal memos discussing project overseer. Castellan's jaw tightened as he scrolled through a few files, confirming they were genuine. How many copies exist?
Enough that eliminating us won't eliminate the problem. The files are distributed with a dead man's switch. As long as we check in regularly, they stay private. But if something happens to us, or to Sarah, or to Emma, everything goes public automatically. That's a dangerous game. Dead man's switches can fail. Copies can be traced. Then you'd better hope nothing happens to motivate us to test it. Now let Sarah go.
Castellan nodded to one of his men, who stepped back from Sarah. She stood frozen for a moment, as if she didn't quite believe she was being released. Then her eyes found David, and recognition flickered across her face.
You're David, from the restaurant. You really came.
Emma needed her mom. Come on, let's get you out of here.
Sarah took a hesitant step forward. David moved to meet her, Marcus staying back to cover them with the laptop. Castellan watched the exchange with cold calculation. "Ms. Mitchell, I hope you understand that this arrangement depends on your continued silence. Any attempt to go public with your story will void our agreement."
I understand you'll do anything to protect your crimes. But I also understand that I finally have leverage. So we're done. You leave me and my daughter alone, and I keep your secrets. That's the deal.
Castellan's expression darkened, but he nodded curtly. Sarah reached David, her legs suddenly unsteady. He caught her arm, steadying her.
I've got you. Emma's safe. Everything's going to be okay.
Thank you. God, thank you. I thought I'd never see her again.
They backed away slowly, Marcus keeping the laptop visible until they'd put distance between themselves and Castellan. Only when they'd reached the edge of the plaza and melted into the crowd did they finally turn and move quickly toward their car. They didn't speak until they were in the car and several blocks away from Union Station. Marcus drove with constant attention to the mirrors, watching for any sign of pursuit. Sarah sat in the back seat, her hands trembling, her face pale with exhaustion and relief. David turned to look at her, really seeing her for the first time in 8 years.
Are you hurt? Did they do anything to you?
Nothing physical. Just questions. Constant questions about where I'd hidden the files, who else knew, whether I'd made copies. They kept saying if I cooperated, they'd let me go see Emma. But I knew they were lying.
How long have they been holding you?
4 days. They moved me twice, different locations, always isolated. I didn't think anyone would come. I thought Emma would end up in the system and I'd just disappear.
Emma's safe. She's been staying in my apartment with someone Marcus trusts. She's scared and worried about you, but she's okay.
Sarah's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. Years of fear and running, of carrying impossible weight alone, finally breaking through.
I can't believe you did this. You barely knew me. You had no reason to risk everything for us.
Emma showed up at my door terrified and alone. That was reason enough. And Sarah, she had your photograph. The one with the safety deposit key visible. You were brilliant in coding everything she'd need to find help right there in a picture she'd carry everywhere.
I hoped someone would figure it out if I got taken. I just never imagined it would be you. How is she really? Not just physically safe, but emotionally?
Struggling. She's been brave, but she's 7 years old and she's lost everything she knew. She needs her mom. She needs to know this running is finally over.
But is it over? Castellan agreed to back off, but can we trust that? What's to stop them from coming after us again once they think we've let our guard down?
The dead man's switch. As long as it's active, you're protected. They know that eliminating you triggers the release of everything you collected. Mutually assured destruction keeps everyone honest.
For how long? A year? 5 years? Forever? Emma can't grow up looking over her shoulder, waiting for them to change their minds.
Marcus merged onto the highway, putting more distance between them and Denver. He glanced at Sarah in the rearview mirror.
That depends on you. The files give you leverage, but leverage only works if you're willing to use it. You need to decide, do you want to stay hidden with a constant threat hanging over you, or do you want to go public and force accountability?
Going public means Emma grows up as the daughter of a whistleblower. People will either see her as a hero's kid or a traitor's kid depending on their politics. She'll be scrutinized, possibly threatened by people who think I was wrong to expose Overseer. Is that better than hiding?
I don't know, but I think Emma deserves to make that choice with you when she's old enough to understand. For now, you need to focus on being together and figuring out what comes next.
They drove in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. David texted Charlotte, "We have her. Sarah's safe. Coming home now. Can you prepare Emma?" Charlotte's response came quickly. "She's going to lose her mind with relief. Drive carefully. We'll be waiting." The flight back felt surreal. Sarah sat between David and Marcus, still processing that she was actually free, that this wasn't some elaborate trick. She kept touching her wrist where she'd worn a watch, a nervous habit, as if grounding herself in physical reality. David noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook when she tried to drink the water the flight attendant offered. Whatever questions Castellan's people had asked, however they'd asked them, it had taken a toll.
Tell me about Emma. Everything. What she said, what she did, how she found you. I need to know she was okay while I was gone.
David told her everything. Emma's arrival in the ring, the photograph and the teddy bear, her fear of the police and insistence that they couldn't be trusted, the nightmares and the questions about her father, the new clothes they'd bought together, her bravery and her fragility. Sarah listened with tears streaming silently down her face, absorbing every detail about the daughter she'd thought she might never see again.
She asked about him, the man in the photograph. She wanted to know if he was her father, if he was looking for her too.
Sarah's expression closed off, pain replacing the relief that had been there moments before.
His name was Michael. Michael Brennan. My husband, once. Before everything fell apart.
Was he involved with Meridian? With what happened to you?
He was Meridian. Senior analyst, true believer in their mission. When I found out about Overseer, I went to him first. I thought he'd help me report it, that we'd do the right thing together. Instead, he told his superiors. He chose the company over me, over Emma, over everything we'd built.
So Meridian knew you'd discovered Overseer because your husband told them.
Yes. They offered me a deal, stay quiet, accept a generous severance, and walk away with my career intact. But I'd seen what they were doing. The scope of it. Thousands of innocent people monitored without cause. I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen it.
So you tried to go to the press.
I contacted 3 different journalists. Michael found out somehow. Maybe they were monitoring my communications. Maybe he was watching me closer than I realized. The night before I was supposed to meet the first reporter, he came to our house. He said I was making a terrible mistake. That I was throwing away everything for nothing. That Overseer was necessary for national security.
Sarah wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand.
We fought. Really fought. I told him I was taking Emma and leaving. He said he'd use his connections to make sure I never saw her again if I tried to expose Meridian. That he'd have me declared an unfit mother, that he'd paint me as unstable and paranoid. So I ran. I took Emma in the middle of the night, emptied our bank account, and disappeared.
And he let you go. Just like that?
He reported me as kidnapping Emma. Put out an alert. But I used the fake IDs I'd already prepared and we stayed ahead of the search. After a few months, the official search died down. But Meridian never stopped looking. Michael made sure of that.
The word on the back of the photograph. Forgive. You were asking him for forgiveness?
I was hoping someday Emma would forgive me. For the life I forced on her. For taking her away from everything she knew. For making her live in fear.
They landed at 10 p.m. The airport was quieter now, late-night travelers moving through with purpose. Sarah looked exhausted, barely able to stay on her feet. Marcus hailed a cab while David stayed close to Sarah, still half expecting federal agents to materialize and take her again.
Once we get you home and you've seen Emma, you need to decide your next move. You can keep running with the dead man switch's protection, or you can consider going public with everything now that you're safe. But that's a decision for tomorrow. Tonight, just be with your daughter.
I just want to hold her. That's all I've wanted for 4 days.
The cab dropped them a block from David's apartment building. They walked the final distance through the quiet streets, David's keys ready in his hand. He unlocked the main door and led them up the stairs, his heart pounding. Charlotte would have told Emma they were coming, but he still didn't know how the reunion would go. 7 years of running, 4 days of captivity, and now suddenly safety. It was enough to overwhelm anyone, much less a 7-year-old child. David unlocked his apartment door and pushed it open. Charlotte stood in the living room, her expression understanding. And there, on the couch clutching her teddy bear, was Emma. She looked up as they entered, her eyes going wide. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Emma launched herself off the couch and ran.
Mom. Mom.
Emma. Oh God, Emma.
They collided in the middle of the room, Sarah dropping to her knees to wrap her arms around her daughter. Both of them were sobbing, holding each other like they'd never let go. Emma buried her face in her mother's shoulder while Sarah rocked back and forth, one hand cradling Emma's head, the other pressed against her back. David felt his throat tighten, his own eyes burning with tears. He didn't try to stop.
I thought they took you forever. I thought I'd never see you again.
I'm here. I'm right here. I'm never leaving you again. Never. I promise.
But what if they come back? What if they find us again?
They won't. David and Marcus made sure of that. We're safe now. Really safe. We can stop running.
Emma pulled back enough to look at her mother's face, searching for confirmation that this was real.
We can stay? In one place? I can go to school and have friends?
Yes. All of that. We'll find a place and we'll stay. I promise you, Emma. The running is over.
Charlotte quietly gathered her things and moved toward the door. She paused beside David, her voice low.
You did good. Most people wouldn't have taken the risk.
Thanks for keeping her safe. I couldn't have done any of this without knowing she was protected.
Charlotte nodded and slipped out, leaving them to their reunion. Marcus followed shortly after, clapping David on the shoulder as he left.
Call me if you need anything. I'll keep monitoring the dead man's switch and make sure all our insurance policies stay active. For now, let them have this moment.
David closed the door behind Marcus and turned back to find Sarah and Emma still holding each other on the floor. Eventually, they moved to the couch, Emma curled against her mother's side. Both of them exhausted but unable to stop touching, confirming through constant contact that the other was really there.
David, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life. You saved Emma. You risked everything for people you barely knew.
Emma came to my door asking for help. What else was I supposed to do?
Most people would have called the police, would have let the system handle it. You chose to believe a scared kid and follow through even when it got dangerous. That's extraordinary.
David bought me clothes. And he promised he wouldn't leave me. And he found Marcus, who's really smart and kind of scary. And they went to Denver and got the files from the bank just like you planned.
You figured out the photograph, the key and the word on the back.
It took us a while. But yeah, we found the safety deposit box. The files are now distributed with a dead man switch. As long as we're all alive and safe, they stay private. But if Castellan or Meridian tries anything, everything goes public automatically.
So we're really safe? This isn't temporary?
As safe as we can make you. The leverage is solid. They won't risk exposure as long as the switch is active.
Sarah closed her eyes, letting that reality sink in. 7 years of running, of fear, of never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. Finally over. Emma seemed to sense her mother's emotional state and snuggled closer.
Can we really stay here? With David?
The question caught David off guard. He'd been so focused on rescuing Sarah that he hadn't thought about what came after, where they'd live, how they'd rebuild their lives. His apartment was tiny, barely suitable for one person, much less 3.
You can stay as long as you need to. We'll figure out the long-term plan together. But yeah, you're welcome here.
We won't impose long. Just until I can find work and get us set up somewhere. I have some money saved, hidden accounts Meridian doesn't know about. Not much, but enough to start over.
But I like it here. David's nice. And he promised we could watch movies together.
And we will. Movies, games, whatever you want. But your mom's right, you'll want your own place eventually. Somewhere that's really yours. But there's no rush. Take the time you need to breathe and figure things out.
Emma yawned hugely, exhaustion finally catching up with the adrenaline and relief. Sarah brushed hair back from her daughter's face with infinite gentleness.
You should sleep, sweetheart. Real sleep, without worrying. We're safe now.
Will you stay with me? I don't want to sleep alone.
I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right beside you all night.
David showed them to his bedroom, the only real bed in the apartment. Sarah looked like she wanted to protest, to insist they take the couch, but she was too exhausted to argue. Emma climbed under the covers, still clutching her teddy bear, while Sarah lay down beside her. Within minutes, Emma was asleep, her face peaceful for the first time since she'd arrived at David's door days ago. David sat on his couch in the dark living room, listening to the quiet sounds of breathing from the bedroom. His apartment, which had felt empty and lonely just days ago, now held 2 people who desperately needed safety and stability. He thought about calling in to work tomorrow, probably for several more days. He'd need to figure out their living situation, help Sarah navigate starting over, make sure Emma got enrolled in school somewhere. His phone buzzed quietly. A text from Marcus. All systems green. Dead man's switch is active and monitoring. You did good today. Get some rest. David sent back a simple thanks, then set his phone aside. He pulled out the photograph Emma had carried, the one that had started all of this. Sarah's forced smile. Michael Brennan's partial profile. Baby Emma, unaware of the storm brewing around her. And that single word on the back, forgive. Sarah had hoped Emma would someday forgive her for the life they'd had to live. But looking at the sleeping child in the next room, David thought Emma didn't need to forgive anything. Sarah had made impossible choices to protect her daughter, had sacrificed everything, career, marriage, stability, safety, to do what she believed was right. That wasn't something that required forgiveness. That was something that deserved recognition. He heard movement from the bedroom. Sarah emerged, closing the door quietly behind her. She joined him on the couch, sitting at the other end, her eyes red from crying, but also somehow lighter than they'd been at the airport.
She's really asleep. I keep checking to make sure she's breathing, that this is real.
It's real. You're both safe. You can stop waiting for the other shoe to drop.
I don't know how to do that. Stop waiting. Stop watching over my shoulder. It's been my entire existence for 7 years.
Then you learn. One day at a time. You wake up, you're still safe. Next day, same thing. Eventually your nervous system figures out the danger has passed.
I owe you everything. Literally everything. My life, Emma's safety, our future. How do I ever repay that?
You don't. You just live. You give Emma the stable life she deserves. You find work you care about. You stop running. That's payment enough.
Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands.
Michael. Emma's father. He's still out there. He works for Meridian. He helped them hunt me. What if he tries to take her? Claims parental rights?
Then we deal with it. But Sarah, he hasn't seen Emma in 7 years. He helped a corporation hunt down his own wife. No court is going to look favorably on that if it comes to custody. And if he tries anything off the books, he triggers the dead man's switch just like everyone else.
You really think Emma will be okay? After everything she's been through?
I think she's resilient. And I think having you back, having stability, will help her heal. She'll probably need therapy at some point. There's trauma there that won't just disappear. But she's strong. She survived 4 days thinking she'd lost you. She can survive anything.
She shouldn't have had to survive anything. She should have had a normal childhood. Birthday parties and school plays and friends. Not motel rooms and fake names and constant fear.
You gave her what you could while protecting her from something most 7-year-olds couldn't even comprehend. That's not failure, Sarah. That's heroism. And now you get to give her the rest, the birthday parties and school plays. The normal life. It's not too late for that.
Sarah wiped at her eyes and managed a small, genuine smile.
Thank you. For believing in us. For seeing this through when you had every reason to walk away.
Emma showed up at my door terrified and alone. Walking away was never an option.
In the days that followed, a new routine emerged. Sarah found temporary work through contacts Marcus provided, remote consulting that didn't require background checks or official paperwork. Emma started online schooling, carefully monitored to ensure no one could track her location. David's apartment remained their base, cramped but safe, while they searched for a more permanent solution. The dead man's switch stayed active. Marcus monitored it daily, ensuring their insurance policy against Meridian remained solid. Castellan and his people kept their distance, apparently deciding that the risk of exposure outweighed whatever benefit they'd gain from silencing Sarah permanently. The files remained distributed, dormant, but ready to deploy if anyone broke the fragile peace they'd negotiated. Emma slowly began to relax. The nightmares decreased. She laughed more. She and Sarah spent hours together, rebuilding their relationship without the constant pressure of running. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, Emma would sit with David while they watched movies, her head resting against his shoulder, comfortable in a way she'd never been able to be before. Sarah often thought about going public, about releasing the overseer files and forcing accountability for what Meridian and their federal partners had done. But each time she considered it, she looked at Emma, finally stable, finally safe, finally able to be a child, and decided the price was too high. Maybe someday, when Emma was older and better equipped to handle the scrutiny. But not now. Now, they would simply live. The photograph remained on David's bookshelf, a reminder of where they'd started. Sarah had offered to destroy it, to burn away the past like she'd burned that old ID badge years ago. But David had suggested they keep it instead, not as a painful reminder, but as evidence of survival. of the impossible choices Sarah had made and the courage Emma had shown, of the moment when a scared child had knocked on a stranger's door and that stranger had chosen to help rather than turn away. Because sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. One person willing to see another's pain and decide it matters. One person willing to risk comfort and safety because someone else desperately needs help. David hadn't been extraordinary before Emma arrived. He'd been ordinary, a network security analyst with a quiet life and no particular heroism. But when given the choice between easy and right, he'd chosen right. And that choice had saved 2 lives and given them the chance to finally stop running.
David? Mom says we might be able to rent an apartment nearby. So we can have our own place but still see you a lot. Would that be okay?
More than okay. I'd like that.
Good. Because you're family now. Even if we're not related. Mom says family is who shows up when you need them. And you showed up.
David looked at Sarah, who smiled and nodded in agreement. Family. Not the one you were born into, but the one you chose. The one you built from impossible circumstances and desperate choices and the simple decision to care about someone else's suffering.
Yeah. I guess I did show up. And I'm glad, because I can't imagine life without you two anymore.
It wasn't the ending Sarah had imagined when she'd sent Emma running that terrible night. It wasn't the life David had expected when he'd opened his door to find a soaking wet child with a worn teddy bear. But it was theirs, imperfect, complicated, built on foundations of trauma and healing. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The moral isn't about grand gestures or perfect solutions. It's about seeing someone in need and choosing to help, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when you have every reason to walk away. Because sometimes, the difference between tragedy and survival is just one person willing to say, I see you, I believe you, and I'm not going to let you face this alone. What would you have done if Emma knocked on your door? Would you have opened it? Would you have believed her story? Would you have risked everything to save someone you barely knew? That's the question we all have to answer, not in theory, but in the moment when someone desperate and frightened needs help. The moment when comfortable becomes complicated. The moment when we decide what kind of person we really are. If this story moved you, if you believe in people who show up when others need them, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Subscribe to hear more stories about courage in impossible circumstances. And remember, you might be someone's only hope. When that moment comes, I hope you choose to open the door. Because somewhere, right now, someone needs you to be the person who doesn't turn away. Someone needs you to be David. Someone needs you to believe their impossible story and help them anyway. Be that person.